Solid waste update. It is January 4th, 2023, and the time is 1:02 p.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks and Duncan, and we expect Commissioner Filios at any time. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll head on to our business discussion items, and what I will probably let you do, JP, is you can just go ahead and move through the agenda, and that'll make things go a little faster. So, all right.
If you have any questions, then do you want to hold them till the end, or do you just want to interject?
No, we'll just interject,
Oh,
I think.
okay.
So,
Sounds great. Thank you.
yeah, all right.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Phillips for the record. Today is the solid waste quarterly update for the beginning of 2023. I would like to begin by discussing upcoming projects that we have, beginning with the Athol Paving project. So as you know, recently I solicited quotes, or the Solid Waste Department solicited quotes, received a couple. We awarded the quote or the bid to Coeur d'Alene Paving. They will be beginning in the spring of this year. JUB will likely be overseeing certain aspects of construction related to grading and drainage. Actual paving will though likely be in the spring sometime, just weather dependent when the weather starts turning. So we are on their list. Moving on to the Ramsey Transfer Station Improvement Evaluation. As you know, Kootenai County Solid Waste has been working with Jacobs Engineering together on ways to improve efficiencies at the Ramsey Transfer Station. One idea has been to create a self-service area, so as customers come into the Ramsey Transfer Station, you would be able to drive up onto the old landfill area and basically dump your garbage, very small loads, so bagged garbage or under 200 pounds loads. We would peel that traffic off. This is an idea, it hasn't come to fruition yet, but customers would go in, dump similar to a rural site, and then leave the site having never had to actually go through a scale house. Then we would weigh that garbage for tracking purposes at the transfer station once it's loaded into a trailer. So we estimate that the traffic on different days this could be as much as 30 to 50% of the traffic that could be peeled off, and really help with the flow within the transfer station and help create more longevity for the site. Another idea is also adding a loading bay. This will be necessary in the future, so we talked about this, where we put another tunnel, as you would call it, or an area where an 18-wheeler can back a trailer in and we can top load garbage. This would increase the size of the commercial unloading area, kind of slightly, I guess you'd say, east of the current transfer station. This would allow more commercial disposal, easier loading, some redundancy in operation, so that if the current Grizzly or Crane broke down, we would have another for loading. These are things that Ramsey will need as our population and the waste mass increases over time. We're still in the early phases of planning, but I have got some preliminary budget numbers. I'm not prepared to share them at the moment, but just some guesses from the engineer, more or less. We are considering, I may bring this to the board at the next quarterly meeting or even before that, the Solid Waste Department, because we own our own dump trucks and some construction equipment, may be able to build that pad that I mentioned for the self-unload and just haul our own rock and do our own compaction and things like that. So, of course, with some engineering oversight and some third-party QA/QC. So, but we may be looking at that to save the county some money and to try to get that project done, because basically we just have to pay for building materials then and just do it ourselves. So. Moving on to Part C under projects, the landfill right-of-way fix. So this is just a reminder, I've been working for quite a while with Worley Highway District on fixing an old right-of-way issue that ran in front of our Highway 95 property down by Fighting Creek. This was a right-of-way that had been on the books for around 100 years. Some wetlands were built in the area of that existing right-of-way. And at the time we talked to the Highway District when we built those the wetlands, they said just carry on and we'll figure it out later. Well, the time has come to figure it out. Yeah. So, because we were looking at South Cell landfill permitting, I was instructed to go ahead and try to fix this right away. We're still working on it. Worley Highway and Kootenai County has come to an agreement on what we could do to fix that. Plans were submitted to the state. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for the state of Idaho to come back and say, yeah, everything looks good, because of their interest in Highway 95 and then the entrance off of Highway 95 in that area. So we're just waiting for that, but things look good because there was an application put through to Worley Highway District from the state for another entrance in that area. So we believe we're on track to get that done, but I'm still waiting to hear back. But that's just an update on that item. So moving on to Fighting Creek Landfill. Operations, so the garbage volumes have slowed as normal for this time of year. This is typical, with the exception of Christmas and New Year's when, we have a slight uptick. The guys down there are currently building a 15-foot lift and following an engineered grade plan. Our landfill management team continues to do a great job. These are relatively new managers down there, but they've been doing a great job executing plans in regarding to lift sequencing, road extensions, stormwater control, and landfill gas systems. So I have every bit of faith in those guys to keep doing a great job. They've been doing a really excellent job down there. Moving on to the landfill gas system. Overall, the gas system this year has been functioning very well. We've received a couple of odor complaints, really minor along the highway. Nothing really to speak of beyond that. This past year, we did relocate. As a reminder, we fixed the slope on an 8-inch main gas line. The crew also welded up 12 to 1,300 feet of a new 12-inch main gas header that will connect the rough north and south sides of the gas system and increase flow, helping us with some vacuums and things like that, especially during cold weather. The line is welded in place, but because there's been some thawing and there's stormwater now flowing in some ditches that are adjacent to the edge of the landfill, those main gas headers are beneath those ditches. And so what we don't want to do is undermine those ditches, so that's kind of halted our ability to dig down and tie into those main gas lines at this time. So we'll have to wait till the water really quits flowing, because we don't want to risk a stormwater ditch caving in and then running down our roadways and washing things out. So we'll have to just wait on that. But again, the gas system's been working fine, so I'm not too concerned about waiting a little while to complete that project. Also worth mentioning, the crew this past week has been in the process of extending another gas collection trench across the top of the landfill. This line will help collect additional landfill gas on the north side of phase E1. This is an area that has quite a bit of gas, but it's a planned gas line, and they're just continuing by following the plan so that we get those collection lines in place as required. So I have a new topic under landfill, the Fighting Creek landfill, and that's leachate treatment. So leachate, as you know, is basically the wastewater that flows from the landfill. So as waste comes in, sometimes it's fairly saturated, and then also it'll rain on the garbage. That water percolates down through the landfill, and out comes a wastewater that we have to treat, and it's considered an industrial wastewater. It's typically fairly high strength in comparison to wastewater that flows from people's houses. So over the past several years, we've been allowed to haul any excess wastewater that we're not able to treat on site, which we typically use the mister system and evaporation to get rid of the bulk of our water. But we've been allowed to haul that to the Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board's treatment facility in Hayden, Idaho. Recently, Hayden informed Kootenai County Solid Waste that rules and regulations on the discharge limits will be tightening up for their facility, and because of this, the leachate may not be able to be continued to be dumped at their facility if left untreated. So what that means is that basically we're going to have to look at likely pre-treatment of leachate to meet standards that Hayden would have to allow them to accept it. So Kootenai County Solid Waste has been working with Hayden as well as our engineers to begin looking at certain treatment options that are very, very likely will be necessary. We have already contacted multiple vendors and are beginning to look at filtration as well as reverse osmosis for cleaning the leachate to standards that Hayden could accept. It's likely that these cleaning efforts would also enhance our evaporation, so it could help with the Mister Basin evaporation, and eventually we could have a long-term goal of land application, although we looked at this in the past and we didn't quite get there during the first pilot study. However, so this spring, because this is coming up and it is very important that we do take on this issue and try to resolve what we can do to be able to continue hauling wastewater to Hayden in at least an emergency capacity. A pilot test or a short-term operating contract will likely be needed this spring or early in the summer to make sure that we figure out what technologies are necessary to do the job before we actually invest in a larger scale treatment method that would be permanent at the facility. The Solid Waste Department will very likely be requesting proposals from vendors in the near future, and I will keep the board in the loop on anything we discover. Any questions about any of that? Okay. So moving on to transfer station operations. The transfer station's operations have also slowed a bit. This is typical again for this time of year with the exception of Christmas and New Year's. We are very busy this week just because of the holiday. A lot of waste is coming in. Residents are reminded that we accept Christmas trees at both transfer stations, and we encourage recycling of these trees by placing them in our brush piles at either the Prairie or Ramsey facilities. We also placed a Christmas tree bin at the Chilco Rural Collection Site for our residents in the northern part of the county. On January 13th, so coming up shortly, we have scheduled to replace the Grizzly crane at the Ramsey transfer station. This work should be completed within 1 day and will somewhat limit commercial disposal and large loads, the ability to dump those at the Ramsey site. So we will actually be asking people to divert and go to the Prairie transfer station for those large loads and commercial loads. So the big haulers coming out of the residential areas will be required to go to the Prairie station if they want to dump that day. We are advertising specifically about this temporary inconvenience via flyers, internet postings, as well as we're posting on the flyer board, and we've called all of the local hauling companies. So everybody should be well aware of that 1 day inconvenience. Assuming nothing goes wrong with the installation, it should just be the 1 day. So moving on to staffing levels and recruitment, the solid waste department, like other departments, has experienced quite a bit of turnover the past couple of years. We've been able to hire several new employees recently, especially I think largely due to the pay increases. Thank you very much. Currently we have 5 open positions within the department, and this is down from 10 openings in October. So we're doing pretty well. I'm optimistic that we'll fill the remaining positions probably likely this spring, or before the spring, before we get busy. So moving on to rural sites, I just wanted to give you a quick update. As you know, we had a new hauling company begin October 1st. That was Sunshine Disposal, or Coeur d'Alene Garbage. I've been doing it for a number of years. There were some bugs to be worked out, but Sunshine, all in all, has been doing an excellent job. They've appear to have gotten all those kinks worked out, excuse me, and they've done a very good job keeping the sites maintained in a very neat and tidy fashion. The sites look excellent, and many residents have noted that the sites look better than they have in a long time, as well as customers seem to really like the new containers. There's a slightly different dimension. These containers are slightly lower so that residents are more easily able to, heave their garbage bags up into the containers and load the container. So we have received input that those are very nice. So.
Good.
Another thing I wanted to discuss with the rural sites has to do with cameras. So you've heard me talk about this many times. Solid Waste Department is working with Ednetics on the installation of 2 live feed surveillance cameras at our Worley Rural Collection site. The cameras are currently installed, and Ednetics is just working out the final details on connectivity. They're having a couple issues with connectivity. These cameras are specifically being installed to be a deterrent to any kind of illegal dumping or down at the site. So our biggest issues at these sites are usually people leaving furniture or appliances or things like that on the ground, or household hazardous waste. When I say that, I mean paint, like old paint in cans, not just dumped directly on the ground, but the cans being left there. Oil, old oil, motor oil changes, or automotive parts. Those large items are left outside. So Worley is one of the hardest hit sites for this, so that's why we chose to put the cameras there first. The Kootenai County Sheriff's Department will be given access to those live feed links so that deputies can monitor those sites remotely and be able to see what's live going on at the sites. So moving on to solid waste statistics, because it's so close to the end of 2022, I'll be discussing a comparison between January through November of 2022 versus 2021. So 11-month period of time. So just to let you know, roughly the customers at Ramsey are down 7.65%. So we were down, I should say customer site visits, not really customers. So actually the amount of times cars came in. That's down 27,856 transactions for the total of the year.
What was the percentage again?
7.65%. So that's basically looking at vehicle numbers coming into the site. The tonnage is also down 5.51% compared to that same time period. At Prairie, the customers are down 5.64%, but the tonnage was up 0.93%. So there were some things that impacted that, though. The Ramsey site was actually had a partial closure for about a week at the beginning of July for pit repairs. So that funneled some traffic to Prairie. So in reality, Prairie being up 0.93% is probably not accurate. It was pretty flat. Ramsey was probably actually not down quite as much as it said, but you still get the rough idea. However, the landfill tons, when you look at that, it was actually up 2%. And this is because we've been making a real effort at diverting a lot of these tear downs of houses directly to the landfill so that we don't have to move the waste, the demolition houses through the transfer stations. They really weren't designed to move houses through. So we require contractors to come in when they're demoing a house. We evaluate the size of the project and then make a determination if that really needs to go to the landfill. So we've been trying to do that as much as possible. Contractors do get a slightly reduced rate to try to cover their trucking expenses when they do that. So of the landfill tonnage, 7,224 tons were hauled directly to the landfill by contractors, which saved on hauling that through a transfer station. When you look at the rural sites, the customer visits at Athol and Chilco were actually flat. They were 0% change. There was 189,818 site visits at those sites. So they're used pretty well, used pretty heavily. So the tonnage was actually down at those rural sites by 13%. And you've heard me speak to this before. I really believe that this is looking at all the rural sites combined. I really believe that effort that law enforcement's been making to try to help police those sites has changed our numbers quite a bit. So with that, I have completed the solid waste quarterly update, unless you have any questions.
Wow.
No questions?
Great job.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, no questions?
No.
All right, thank you, and I will call for public comment. Okay. All right, hearing none, 1:19 and meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, JP. Appreciate it.
Good job.
Chris.